Hello. Are you on with us, Bella? So far, we have one. Can unmute. Let me try to unmute. Now, how do we unmute people?
People? Let's see. Depends. People should be able to unmute themselves. I don't know. They should be able to unmute themselves.
Bella, you should be able to unmute yourself. You should be able to unmute yourself. Connie, are you able to talk? Bella?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Bella, are you able to talk now? I'm not sure what Bella, you still having a problem? Maybe we should start shortly. So far we have Bella and we have Connie. Okay, let us begin. Last week we got cut off in the middle. We got cut off. So let me just review the last thing we studied, that women have an obligation of making Kiddush the same way men do. Kiddush is an obligation on every person who's Jewish, who's an adult. It's just that we have a law in Judaism that when it comes to speech, especially when it comes to mitzvahs that involve speech, we have one person who articulates the mitzvah, and as long as someone else is listening, others who are listening and they want to fulfill the mitzvah through the leader's Kiddush or the leader's Havdalah. So in Jewish law, we view it as if it's Shmiya Kainah. Shemei Kainu, sorry. Shemei Kainu, which means if you're listening, it's if you're responding yourself, you're saying it yourself. So a man and woman get together. You have some people like to make their own Kiddush. Jeremy, Zimra, okay. So some people like to make their own Kiddush, but technically you have one person making Kiddush for all 10 or 15 guests that you have. And it could be a woman making the Kiddush for everybody. Tradition has it that the man of the household does it. And as I said last week, I guess a good part of that tradition is because in times of the Shulchan Aruch, and even go back 150 years ago, most women were pretty unschooled, illiterate. So that's what I guess that's one of the reasons that women didn't lead the Kiddush. But certainly if a woman's by herself, which is another group of women, you have to have one person make Kiddush for everyone else, or each one can make their own Kiddush. Now, the idea of Kiddush, which means Kedusha, Kedusha means sanctity. And on Shabbos, we are endowed with a special ability to be holy, which means to sense God. It's called Gilui Elokus, a revelation of God. All of us on Shabbos have the ability to get closer to God. Have a greater, even though God is quite abstract and transcendent and infinite, but on Shabbos we have the ability to get closer and have a greater sense of God. On top of that, we try to bring that sense of divinity into our surroundings and especially into the food that we eat. And if our rabbi just said, we don't want you eating any food on Shabbat before you make Kiddush. Whether it's food or it's drinking, even taking water. As soon as the time for Kiddush arrives, before you eat anything, you're supposed to be making Kiddush. And Shulchan says, "Afilu mayim," even just taking water. Once the time of Kiddush arrives, which is at sundown, or when Shabbos is accepted by a Jewish woman, the woman accepts Shabbos with the lighting of candles 18 minutes before sundown. From that point onwards, one is not allowed to drink, even water, until Kiddush is made. Yes, I'm looking every so often for new people coming in. My computer, there's not a lot of people come in by themselves. I have to let them in, so that's why there's a big problem over here. Anyway, so usually the law is that when you have a obligation to do a mitzvah, you first do the mitzvah, and then you take your obligations. When you get up in the morning, every day, one should not be taking a coffee until you first at least do some of the blessings, thanking God for getting up, thanking God for giving you sight, thanking God for allowing you, giving you the ability to walk and to talk. All of those are considered. Only when a person, only when a person has said some of the basic blessings in the morning can a person indulge in taking a coffee or taking some cake with that, donut with that. And Rabbi said, therefore, when Shabbos arrives, and on Shabbos all of us have the ability to get closer to God. And again, not just closer to God, but we believe our job in life is to bring holiness into the food that we eat, and into clothing that we wear, and into the house that we live in. So one of the best ways to be able to elevate that food that we eat is by first making Kiddush, sanctifying Shabbat, and declaring this sanctification. And then we eat. Now, when it comes to other commandments, let's say the commandment of davening at night. So if a person began eating in the afternoon, you go to a wedding, a mitzvah fair, and you eat in the afternoon, then you don't have to daven Ma'ariv until after you finish eating. When it comes to Kiddush and Friday night, you cannot eat or drink some wine, even water, as I said, until the Kiddush is made. The rabbis want you to make Kiddush as soon as possible to declare the sanctity of Shabbat, for you to recognize that this is the day to get closer to God. You're able to access God in a more intimate way. And therefore, our rabbis have told us, begin the night with a Kiddush, come back, either you're davening at home or in shul, if you're davening at home, so finish davening and then make Kiddush right away. If you're in shul, so finish shul davening, and then come to your house and make Kiddush, but don't eat or drink. Now, there's also an obligation when we make the Kiddush to cover our tables with a tablecloth and to cover the challah with a piece of material. As you know, there are challah covers out there. The idea being that the reason that we have on Friday night on the table and on Shabbos also for lunch, the reason that we have two breads, two challahs, which are uncut, unsliced, we got two. Because the Jewish people, when they were in the desert 40 years, they merited that each and every day there was manna that fell down, and they were able to exist through eating them on. And Friday and Shabbos, we're not supposed to be carrying in the street on Shabbat, unless there's an error, which we'll talk about in the future. So on Friday, God saw to it that there would be a double portion of man falling on Friday, and that will cover the needs for Friday and Shabbat. That's why we have to have two breads on the table. The breads represent the food and the gift that God gave us in the desert. And if you look in the Torah portion of Mashiach, where it talks first about the man, it's called manna in English, it's man in Hebrew. There it says that the man was covered with a covering. So since the man was covered with a covering, the manna and Shabbos meal, Friday night Shabbos, is supposed to remind us of the miracle that took place in the desert. There was a double portion. And that man was covered with a covering, wasn't a challah cover of material, but it was a challah cover of something that looked like ice. That's the reason that when we make the Kiddush, we're supposed to have on the table a challah cover, all different types of covers that we have with different coloring, but that's where this comes from. Let's move on. Now, as I said before, one should not be eating or drinking the water on Friday night after sundown until Kiddush is made. But if a person didn't know better or forgot, or whatever, for whatever reason, someone else know. For whatever reason, ate before Kiddush, he still can make Kiddush, he still has to make Kiddush. So again, therefore, a person should not be eating for Kiddush or drinking, but if you made a mistake and you ate for Kiddush, you still should be making Kiddush. So you're eating that you ate does not invalidate the Kiddush you still have to make. Now, even though we said there's a special mitzvah, to try to make Kiddush as early as possible on Friday night. But if you didn't make a Kiddush on Friday night, early that is, a person can make Kiddush anytime during the evening. And if a person didn't make Kiddush on Friday night, for some reason, then he makes the Friday night Kiddush for Shabbos lunch. So to repeat, the Friday night Kiddush is the longer Kiddush. It's Kiddush where we make a Baruch Atah Hashem over, we say God's name, and we invoke the Baruch Atah Hashem, which is the standard blessing. That's on Friday night, because the idea of Kiddush according to Torah is when Shabbos enters. That's when you're sanctifying the day, declaring its sanctity. But the rabbis asked you that when you have your meal on Shabbos lunch, people should realize that it's a holy meal also. So we don't have to make the Kiddush bracha. That we don't have to make. All we have to make is a bracha over Geffen, but not the mitzvah bracha. But if a person forgot to make Kiddush on Friday night, or for some reason couldn't do it, then the halacha is the Friday night Kiddush is made for a Shabbos lunch Kiddush. So you say the Kiddush on Friday night, you don't say Vayechulu, because the Chulu says, so God finished creating the heaven and earth on Friday night, so you're not going to say that Shabbos lunch. But the second part, the Gofen and the blessing for Shabbos, the same Friday night Kiddush, that would be said on Shabbos afternoon for that lunch Kiddush that you have. We mentioned before, last time we got together, that the Kiddush is only valid if you eat either bread or cake or pasta. Kiddush has been welcome to. The whole idea of Kiddush is elevating the food that we eat. Again, according to Hasidus, everything, all food that we eat has divine sparks to everything. Life has a divine spark that allows it to exist. And on Shabbos, we're trying to draw out that divine spark in a way that it makes us holier, a sense of divinity that makes the world holier. So he says, in order for the Kiddush to be valid, you have to eat, and you have to eat a minimum of 1 ounce of food, whether it's cake or cookies, ideally challah bread. But just take a piece of fish, or some herring, or some salad. That's not enough. And obviously, if you have people on non-gluten diets, that's the problem, because when it comes to Kiddush, you must make Kiddush either over bread or over cake. Although we said a couple of weeks ago, if you take an entire 4 ounces of wine, 4 ounces of wine, according to some authorities, that's considered to be filling enough, it's satiating enough. So if you're a gluten-free diet and you want to make Kiddush, you have to drink an entire 4 ounces. According to others, you're drinking 8 ounces, but a minimum 4 ounces of wine, and that's considered to be, according to some poskim, some authorities, good enough in terms of a meal for Shabbat. The cup, the Kiddush cup, both the Friday night Kiddush cup or the Shabbos Kiddush that we make, there are certain things that are necessary for the cup. And that is, first of all, it should be a cup which has no cracks to it. Number one, no cracks. Number two, it got to be a clean cup which you wash from the inside and wash from the outside. So sometimes you go to a Kiddush on Shabbos lunch, and someone will take a Kiddush cup in the shul and make Kiddush, and then another person comes down and makes his own Kiddush in the same Kiddush cup. He can do that, but he has to first throw out the contents of the first Kiddush cup and rinse out the cup, and then he can make Kiddush over it. Next halacha. Kiddush cup got to be filled to the top. And in fact, it should overflow to show the blessings overflowing. Also, once, this is important, the wine you drink cannot be pogum, which means that when someone drinks wine, that the rest of the wine in the cup is pogum. It's called pogum, and one cannot do a mitzvah over wine which is pogum. So therefore, you couldn't. If one drinks wine from a cup, another person now wants to make Kiddush over it, he has to render it, take away that state of pogum, which means he has to make it drinkable. And the way to do that is pouring new wine into the cup. So the person has a cup and he drinks a little from it, so that the rest of the wine there becomes invalid for making Kiddush over or benching over, then grace over. But if you pour in a small amount of wine into it, that in halacha renders the wine now fit to be used for Kiddush or for Abdullah or for benching. Also, when you hold the cup, you're supposed to hold the cup in your right hand if you're a lefty in the left hand. Judaism, that's how it works. Person gets up in the morning, even when you put on your trousers, first, right foot first, left foot second, right foot, shoes, right foot or socks, right first, left second. When you wash your hands for an time, right first, left second. If you're lefty, everything is in reverse. Also, you pick up the cup and you lift it above the table for at least 4 inches above the table. Also, you're supposed to be looking at the wine of the cup, glancing every so often. And in fact, the Talmud tells us that glancing at the cup is an antidote if a person has some eye problems with the eye. Glancing at the cup will help you out. In terms of sitting or standing for Kiddush, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the custom that when we Friday night with Kiddush, we stand up, everyone stands up. Truth to be told, the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, written in the 16th century by the 2 great rabbis, Rabbi Yosef Cairo and Moshe Isserles. Rabbi Yosef Cairo was a Sephardi. He lived first in Fez, Morocco, then went to Sfas. And Moshe Isserles was a Ashkenazi who lived in Krakow, both the 16th century, and both were writing a code of Jewish law without the knowledge everyone was doing the same thing. And ultimately, the first one came out with his work was Rabbi Yosef Cairo. And once they came out, so Moshe Isserles, who was the Ashkenazi in Krakow, thought what he would do was just append his areas where he disagrees with Rabbi Yosef Cairo. For the most part, Rabbi Yosef Cairo relied on medieval sages from the Sephardic community, and Moshe Isserles relied on, for the most part, medieval sages of the Ashkenazi medieval centuries. And therefore, you'll find Shulchan Ashkenazi Jews, for the most part, will follow Rav Moshe Isserles. It's called the Ramah. And Sephardic Jews will follow, for the most part, Rav Yosef Cairo. And that's why we have differences between Ashkenazi Jews and Sephardic Jews when it comes to Jewish law. Even when it comes to Pesach, as you know, Sephardic Jews eat rice on Pesach. Ashkenazi Jews don't. So if you look at the Shulchan Aruch, the normative position in Shulchan Aruch is that Kiddush should be said in a sitting position. And there are many Jews that do that, especially German Jews, who are called Ashkenazim, or they're called Yekis, will make Kiddush in Friday night sitting down. But at the same time, the Shulchan Aruch was being written, we had the great mystics living in the city of Sfas, and the greatest of all of them was the Arizal. And the Arizal followed the approach that you should be standing for Kiddush on Friday night, as well as for Friday night that is. And that has become quite common throughout the Jewish world, standing for Kiddush Friday night, even though normative Shulchan Aruch, normative code, tells us that you should be sitting down. Because when you're sitting down, you become like one group. And when you're one group, that's when one person can make Kiddush for everybody. But if everyone's standing up, and you're not really sitting down as a group together, you're standing around the table in all different forms of positions, so to say. So the Norman Shulchan says it's hard for you to be, it's going to be considered one group. To be able to have one person make Kiddush, everybody got to be one group. But as I said, even though Shulchan Aruch suggests and really tells the person should be sitting down, the custom following the Arizal of Isaac Luria is to stand up. Now, if you don't have wine for Kiddush, you can make on grape juice. Ideally, it should be wine. If you are allergic to wine or to grape juice, to grapes, then we can take what's called Chamar Medina. Chamar Medina means any beverage which is popular and extensively used in a certain region that becomes a substitute for wine. So if you don't like wine, it's not good for you. You can take, even according to many opinions, you can even take soda pop because it's popular. It's considered to be a choshev, something important. So whether it's soda pop or perhaps some tea, but it got to be something, it can't be just water. And it can't be just milk. It got to be something that you would give to important guests. You wouldn't give a cup of milk to important guests. But you might give,
Rabbi,
yes.
the wine though, it has to be kosher wine, right? Because not all the wines have kosher.
Right.
Or it
must be kosher wine, and kosher wine is wine that was not processed by a Gentile, because Gentiles, especially in Talmudic times, were into consecrating the wines on altars for pagan gods.
I see.
And on top of that, the other issue was that wine was something that people would fraternize on wine, social events with wine. And when the Jews came back to rebuild the Second Holy Temple in the 2,400 years ago, there were many Jews who were fraternizing with Gentile women who invited them into their homes and gave them kosher food, and gave them kosher wine. And that's when the rabbis came along and said, even if the wine is not sacramental wine, but any wine, across the board prohibition, trying to stem the tide of the intermarriage. The rabbi said, we don't want you, if a Gentile is handling wine, we don't want you drinking that wine. So the hope was this way that would prevent Jewish men socializing with Gentile women and marrying them, which was a problem 2,400 years ago. Didn't start in America, 50 years ago.
I see. Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. So now, if a person doesn't have wine, you can use Chamar Medina, which I said is Chamar Medina is any beverage which is popular in the region and something that you would give to an important guest. Will you give Coke to an important guest? I think so. But on Friday night, if you don't have wine, you can make Kiddush over the challah. Instead of making Burpri Gofen, you make a Moshe Lech Menorah over the challah. Usually we make Kiddush over wine, and then we go to wash hands and we make a Moshe over the challah. But if you don't have wine, you don't like wine, and you don't have any good beverage, which is a popular beverage, then you can make Kiddush instead of Hagafim, make a Moshe Lech Menorah. So wash before the Kiddush begins, and then as soon as the Kiddush ends, you eat the bread. As I said last time, the cup you have should be at least 4 ounces of wine, and your obligation is to drink a bit more than half of it. So as long as you drink more than 2 ounces, you're okay. You're fit to go. Now, technically, the only person who has to drink the wine is the person who makes the Kiddush. So if you have 10 people around the table and you have one leader making the Kiddush, so technically, only that person making Kiddush has to drink the 2 ounces. But our custom is that the person making Kiddush has to drink 2 ounces. Everyone else around the table takes a small amount, like a half an ounce, whatever it is, a couple of drops. That's the custom. And it's an important custom. But technically, the only one who has to make the Kiddush is the only one who has to drink the wine is the person who makes the Kiddush. So after we make the Kiddush over wine, then we wash our hands for the hamotzi. And as you know, in terms of washing your hands for hamotzi, there are three opinions how to do it. When you get up in the morning, the first time when you get up in the morning and you're not eating yet, You wash your hands 3 times on each hand, alternating, right, left, right, left, right, left. If you're lefty, it's left, right, left, right, left, right. That's for getting up in the morning. And that's because according to Torah tells us that there is an impurity, an impure spirit that rests on a person's hands when he gets up, when he or she gets up. And when we wash our hands alternating right, left, right, left, right, left, that removes that impurity. When we go to wash for bread, you got 3 opinions. One opinion is you got to wash once on the right, once on the left, but you have to cover the whole hand. Now, one of the problems people don't wash, one of the problems many people don't wash the whole hand, it has to go all the way up to your wrist. And many people are not careful about that. And that's a shame. They're not doing the mitzvah. You got to do the mitzvah correctly. So when we wash for bread, we wash, some people do once on the right, once on the left. Most people do twice on the right, twice on the left. Chabad we do 3 on the right, 3 on the left. But again, be not alternating. And then we have to wipe our hands. We say the bracha asher kevshana and says it's not all to Shalom, giving us the thank God for the bracha, sanctifying us by washing hands. And then we make the amosi. At least one person around the table has to have a double portion of 2 loaves of bread. As I said before, to remind us of the double portion that fell on Friday for Shabbos. And the person, therefore, is fulfilling the mitzvah. Everyone should have in mind that when they're listening to Hamotzi, then fulfilling the mitzvah of Hamotzi over 2 loaves of bread, unsliced. And the person, therefore, will cut up the bread and give it to everyone around the table. Okay, my half hour is up. Any questions? Are you unmuted? Any questions?
And for the bread, for hamotzi, Rabbi,
Yes.
do you supposed to use knife to break the bread?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Rabbi, for the person that's making the Kiddush, they have to drink the 2 ounces. And then if they're going to share it with, numerous people, because of that pogum, do they refill the cup so there's enough?
No, even if it's well, you're going to have to fill the cup. If you have a lot of people around the table, usually 1 cup is not going to be enough.
Right.
But the people who drink from the small amount are not making Kiddush. Only if you make Kiddush, or if a person is leading the benching or Havdalah, that cup can't be pogum. But a regular cup of drinking for without making Kiddush or without making Havdalah, there's no problem that it's pogum. It doesn't chafe it up. It just rends it unfit to make Havdalah over, or Kiddush over. The rest of the people around the table are not making Kiddush over it. They're just participating and partaking of that wine where Kiddush was made already over it. And when the Kiddush was made over that wine, it was not pogum.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that clear?
Yes, thank you.
How come we are offered to drink from Kiddush on when we make Kiddush for Shabbat, but Havdalah we just listen? We don't drink from the Havdalah cup.
Because the whole idea of Kiddush is that through sanctifying the Shabbos, we're trying to sanctify our food. When Shabbos ends, the sanctity leaves. So there's no mitzvah in drinking the rest of that cup. The person who made the actual Havdalah. So when the person does a mitzvah and drinks over a cup of wine, whether it's a Havdalah or Kiddush or getting married or bris milah or benching or pidyon ben, whoever does it has to drink more than around 2 ounces. But not anyone else, that's their mitzvah. But anyone else around the table doesn't have that mitzvah when it comes to Havdalah, because Havdalah is the declaration of separation, saying that the holiness of Shabbos has ended, and now we're going into the regular week. So there's no special mitzvah of trying to sanctify that wine.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, so God willing, we should meet next week, next Wednesday, and have a beautiful Shabbos, a wonderful Shabbos, and be healthy and protect yourself and enjoy. Enjoy
You
life.
as well. You as well,
Thank you so
Rav.
much.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbos.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure.